Welcome to episode number 135 of Killer POV. I'm one of your hosts, Rob Galluzzo from Blumhouse.com. With me, Elric Kane and his red stripes.
Yeah, man. Very pleased with the red stripe, man.
Are these courtesy of Adam Lime as usual?
Yeah, he heard my plea, remember? Weeks ago. I said if he got us red stripe, I would get, I believe, a full facial tattoo. But in his message to us with the beer, he said I did not need to go that far.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so luckily,
that's a jip.
I will get the red stripe and no facial.
But you have facial hair, which is
right. I'll do.
It's good enough.
Now.
Yeah. And our third host, of course, Rebekah McKendry, editor-in-chief of Blumhouse.com.
I got Twizzlers. Thanks, Rob.
I brought the Twizzlers, not the red vines. None of that shit. Twizzlers here, okay?
Do you guys have preferences for real?
Oh, yeah, totally.
No,
yeah.
I'm totally Twizzlers.
Twizzler all the way. I think it might be an East Coast, West Coast thing. I think. Most West Coast.
No, it is.
It is, right? Most people
like,
from
the movie
here.
theaters out here, they only serve red vines at the movie theaters out here. Totally weird. Like, you get Twizzlers at the movie theater. So, yeah, it's an East Coast,
New York,
West Coast.
Yeah, New York movie theaters, they do it right. Right?
We are Twizzler people.
So,
as a New Yorker.
Yeah, you
Wait,
are.
how long did you live there? Like a month?
I know a few years. But I was little.
Not any of the ones you'd remember, though. It was the very beginning.
Yeah. I just remember playing pickup with Jordan, making jokes with Seinfeld, shooting films with Aronofsky. That was a Brooklyn thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Elric Kane begins. That's what it was.
You were on Sesame Street. It was
I knew some guy painted houses.
Yeah.
What are you can do?
And we have an exciting show for you. We've got what I consider one of the legends of the effects industry, having worked on one of my. In fact, I always say it's my favorite movie, but now it's kind of battle. Evil Dead 2 and Psycho are really neck and neck as my favorite horror movie. But he worked on one of those, so that's not bad. One of my favorites of all time.
I also worked on one. The thing that surprised me, because I knew the big ones, but a movie I've been talking about a lot to other people in the last few weeks, The Mutilator.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm really excited to talk about that because it's just so. I mean, had it been a few weeks before, it wouldn't have made much sense to anyone. But it's out right now.
Yeah, perfect timing.
And that's the best thing about the movie. You've got a movie that's really not very good and has amazing kills. So it's kind of fun.
Courtesy of our guest in a little bit. And also, exciting. It's surprising. We've done 130 some episodes and we've never done an effects episode yet. So
he did a lot of Star Trek Voyager, too.
I know.
That's kind of my
bad. Well, you're right. We haven't, but we did do, the closest we got was Men in Suits.
We did the Men in Monster Suits.
So there's definitely some of that. But
so we've had, we have.
Not a solo
one. This is going to be fun. So there's that. And obviously we've seen some stuff that we'd like to talk about. But I'm going to address the elephant in the room, if there is an elephant.
Is it an elephant?
We're going to talk politics. We're talking about Trump.
No politics.
But I will say this before you start. Somebody sent us a photo of where he is today with his delegates, which will change by tomorrow, and it was 666. And it was amazing. It just said Trump 666, and I was like, yes.
So
if you sent that to us, thank you. That was amazing.
There's a show called Damien happening right now that I think is actually a prequel to what's going to happen in this country pretty soon. But no, I just want to preface this by saying that we're very humble and appreciative of all the feedback we get, positive or negative, and we do listen and read to a lot of it. And we really, we do this for fun. We do it for free. It's just our kind of way of kicking back and loosening up and talking about horror movies. I don't mind if you have issues with the show or if you don't like the show. What I have a problem with is somebody went and gave us a damaging 1-star review on iTunes for the sole purpose that we've missed a few weeks. We've missed a few weeks.
Was that what the comment? I haven't seen the comment.
That's what the comment was. It was like these guys aren't into the podcast anymore because they keep skipping shows or whatever. So, boom, 1 star.
So clearly that person hasn't actually been listening to hear that somebody's having an actual baby.
Oh, no, that's not a valid excuse. Okay, Bekah, you are not allowed anymore to be torn in half. Listen, I'm putting the rule down. Both of you have had 2 each. Yeah. No more.
That's
it.
Okay, I'm kind of okay with that.
You're not allowed to have kids anymore, all right? That's it. Not while the show's running.
I want to go on a holiday. What about a holiday?
I did the show last week with my staples still in, wearing bandages to keep the bleeding at bay.
Nope.
Apparently.
Not valid.
I'm very surprised somebody would bother listening if that's the kind of listen. Like this kind of show, I'm surprised. But whatever, you are whoever you are. It's pretty silly.
It's fine. Again, it's you. That's it. You could have any sort of criticism you want.
Yeah.
But I don't understand the point to go on a very public forum like our iTunes and literally damage our, reputation and score by giving us 1 star for that reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I don't know. That kind of bums me out. And just to address other people, I just want people to know that and I can't believe I have to actually illustrate this, but it's the case because I've even talked to close friends about it. Podcasts are free. They're for you to listen to at your discretion, and you can't satisfy everybody. Literally, every week we get similar messages. One will be, why don't you think of your listeners? Why was your episode 3 hours long? That's just too much. You're asking too much of us. Next message, why was your episode only an hour and a half? I don't understand. Why can't it be longer? Other message, why is it just the three of you talking about movies at the beginning? Like, who gives a shit what you think? Let's just get to the guests. Other people, you know what? I don't like the guests. I actually like listening to the first half.
Sure.
We do the best show we can with all that stuff. If you don't like a guest, you can turn it off.
Yeah. Or yeah.
If you don't like us talking about movies, skip ahead about 20, 30 minutes. This is what I do when I listen to podcasts. I'm not trying to sound like, I'm sorry if I'm coming off sounding like an asshole but I just don't know how else to, like, it's like,
I'm giving this 1 star. Rob's so conceited the way he views his show.
It's not that.
I'm giving Bekah 1 star just because.
I get a star just because. That's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
One.
I mean, more Twizzlers.
No, I mean, look, I agree. If we get all criticism, if it has anything that you can actually do to improve something, that's great. But when somebody says, yeah, you missed a few weeks, so I'm giving you 1 star, that's very silly. They should just write to us, say, hey, I wish. It sounds like someone who really likes the show if they're that upset about it. But it's probably one of these other podcasts trying to take us down.
Yeah.
You know? That's
now
probably
it's
what
a
it is.
conspiracy
Podcast
it was A_Green, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I believe
the
it was.
name was very suspicious. I'm not sure about that.
Come on.
Yeah.
There was a hatchet with a 4.
Right.
And I was just like, that's weird.
And Jay Lynch fan for
Jay
life.
Lynch fan.
So I
don't know.
Hollister one.
I think it's kind of suspect that those are the people that are leaving us negative stuff. But anyway, that said, thank you very much to everybody that does support and gives feedback. Look, we appreciate it. We're not at, nobody's holding us at gunpoint to stay here for 3 hours. We get wrapped up in the heat of the moment. Sometimes you have long discussions. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you want to wrap up early because Bekah's got a newborn kid at home, or Elric's got to get up early tomorrow, or I still have work to do. There's life. Life gets in the way. I don't think we ever
stopped because I had to wake up early, but I think everything else is valid.
I do have a newborn kid at home.
So that's that. Anyways.
I think what Rob's saying is fuck that guy. And let's move on.
Let's roll, boys. Let's go.
All right. So, you know what? Can we start with TV really quickly?
You can start with TV.
I got to say, Bates Motel is off to a stellar 4th season. Mm-hmm. And the reason being is it's only 2 episodes in, and they focus primarily just on Norma and Norman for the most part. This episode that just aired this week, called Good Night Mother, is probably the best episode they've ever done. And it will go down that way, probably.
Could I watch it just on its own if I wasn't going to catch up?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I watched the first 2 seasons.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure you could. I would recommend watching the first 2 episodes, but you could just watch this 1 episode because, like I said, the thing is, we know at least the general, the point of the show is to end up at Psycho, where that is. But the way things have been going, it's kind of like, how is this going to work? Like, it's obvious that Norman has a problem. So,
but wouldn't the end, the natural end point, be killing Mother?
Yes.
Okay, not Mother old and dead
no,
in a chair.
No,
it seems like him murdering her.
Yeah.
would be the point.
And assuming, assuming her persona is But the thing that's interesting is they really, because now it's like, how could that be possible in today's day and age? And the way they're kind of weaving in and out of it is interesting. For example, she's been trying since the end of the 3rd season and the beginning of these first 2 desperately to get him into a mental health facility. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, well, it's going to cost, we'll check with your insurance. It's going to cost X amount of money. We can bump him up on, the list if he's if he was, so it's kind of like the health system is definitely failing.
What is
in
this
that regard
now?
Yeah, it's present.
Wow, I was curious. I was going to say, is that an issue in whenever the original Psycho was?
Obamacare, baby.
What?
No, but if it's
don't get me started on my personal opinions.
Oh no,
about
if
health.
it's contemporary date, let me tell you guys.
It's impossible to get anything done.
The first bill that I received from the hospital post baby came this week, $27,000.
Yes,
it's at my insurance. That's before insurance, but
Holy
all I could think
smokes.
was, what the fuck do you do if you don't have insurance?
Yeah, you're screwed.
$27,000 fucking dollars.
What are you going to do?
I was
it's
there
terrible.
for 48 hours.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But that's one aspect of it, and the other obviously is, I've never thought of it this way, but it's like Freddie Highmore. Like, again, this last episode he did something that only Perkins did before, which is you feel bad for this guy, sympathy, but he's breaking your heart at the same time, and the fact that he's absolutely convinced that his mother is doing these terrible things that he's seen in his head, and that she wants to lock him up for it. It's just amazing. You're like, wow, okay.
I get it. So like he literally thinks she's the one doing the bad crimes. I see. That's
for sure.
Where the line's
he
going.
thinks he's.
I haven't seen any of that yet.
He literally thinks he's protecting her because he's like, I don't understand why she does these things. That
certainly makes sense to Psycho for sure.
Yeah. So it's pretty phenomenal. I thought he did a great job this week. And if you bowed out of the show, I think this season's the one to come back on because they're ending at 5.
Right.
So I feel like now that they're in the last 2 seasons, there's no time to F around. They're just going to do what they got to do. You know.
That's cool.
So I love that. Elric, caught up on Walking Dead?
I did catch up on Walking Dead.
I
and
heard
the last one was great. The one before.
Last one?
That's what I heard is this last one. And
It's
granted,
fantastic.
I don't
Yeah,
watch
I
the
loved it.
show, but a couple of weeks ago, we'd been doing these like Walking Dead recaps, which we were having Elise Wax do. And we stopped doing them a couple weeks ago just because they weren't trending well. And people were like, why would we read this if we already watched the show? And I was like, okay, fair enough. We'll stop them. This week was the first week that we did not run the Walking Dead recap. And this morning I arrived to an inbox of like 10 messages like, why I wanted to read what Elise wrote about it this week because it was such a good episode.
Why not do a tweak instead of a recap, but like a commentary and discussing
She
the
did.
elements?
She did. Yeah.
Because that seems always valid.
Yeah. No, I mean, so
because the one
many...
before I had strong opinions on. I was really kind of shocked and not
yeah.
sure how I felt about it. Almost ruined it for me. And then this one brought it totally back because of what they do with Carol. That's all I'm going to say. Like, it's such a strong
It's interesting. And also, look, I love Alicia Witt.
She was really good.
She was really good in this.
Really
yeah.
Good. Go Redheads.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll take a high five for that. I have not watched Walking Dead in forever, but I'll high five you on the Redheads.
What else have you seen?
I like where it's building, though. Okay, so a couple of cool things. I haven't seen Your Next since I saw it in the theater with 2 people in the theater up in San Francisco.
Right.
I remember going, like, when I was still in theatrical, and I liked it a lot. And I definitely maybe did suffer a little from the overhype at that point, just in terms of, just everyone telling you how great it is. And then I liked it, and I remember, like, kind of half chuckling to myself at a lot of the lines because, when there's no crowd to laugh. So I showed that I'm doing slasher films, so I actually looked over a lot of... I also, rewatched Leslie Vernon, things like that, just for fun. And I played it to about 9 people. I think 2 of them had seen it, but the rest hadn't. 20-year-olds. And, man, we all just, like, laughed our asses off. Like, it was like a perfect black comedy, especially, talk about respect columns. I'm going to call out respect columns for AJ and Swanberg's sibling rivalry depiction, because I think they just kind of totally nail it. Swanberg probably got the most laughs. I mean, I'm just sitting there going, this is a guy whose career is so different.
Yeah, it's the only movie I like him in.
I know, and he's so funny in it.
I gotta agree with that.
And there's that one line, probably one of the best lines, and somebody already wrote to me on Twitter saying it, where he just calls his other brother. The guy says, "Oh, you can buy these cell phone jammers." He's just like, "Fucking lowlife." And he calls his brother a lowlife.
You fucking lowlife. You wouldn't know that.
Yeah, and it's just so good. Like, but I also think the big thing, my big takeaway, besides the fact that this movie is like really gone up in my esteem from this viewing. Partly because of that, largely because of Sharni. Like, I saw it in a different way, knowing that she's the final girl, knowing that she's going to kick all this ass, watching how her decisions are made from step 1. Like, the first thing she does, like, drop on the floor. From then on, watching her, it's fucking great because you realize what her skill set is, and it's exciting. But even better than that, now, this will be a little spoilery, so if you haven't heard it, just fast forward 1 minute.
We've already spoiled this on the show. We've talked about it a lot.
But I do want to say, like, and I will avoid saying who they are, but the couple actors, who are involved in the crime. So, part of, once we realize who they are, watching it a second time, those performances are so much more interesting than first time. Especially, if you're listening. I just found certain moments where they look at each other, look at somebody, so much more interesting because you're like, oh, they're weighing up. All this loss that's about to happen.
Yeah, it's a movie that I think gets better on repeat viewings. I caught it, I think it was on like Chiller like a few weeks ago, and I just happened to tune in the middle of it, the joys of having cable all of a sudden. Yeah. And I kind of was drawn into it. I was like, oh, this is super cool. And then I, enjoyed
and also
it much more.
And like, I showed it as a slash, and then I realized very quickly, yeah, it is, but it's also, it's home invasion. It's not a super, our typical 80s slash. That's why I showed it. I wanted to show a contemporary version. But like, it also doesn't, it also like, kind of reverses and mixes up about 2 or 3 genres together, which I don't know, I just really appreciated it more. And I think if you haven't seen it since it came out, you might. I mean, it's still a shame it's not Thanksgiving, but it's their wedding anniversary. Good call.
We'll take
How did your students like it?
No, that's what I mean. They were really loving it. Like, they were laughing all the way through the film in all the positive way, and I could tll they were really gelled into Sharni, her performance, Erin's performance, and what she did. And I think they were really excited by it. So that was a nice feeling, because you never know. It was just like when I showed The Fly and it hit. Other films have shown before and they don't hit anymore, and you're like, okay, interesting that what translate. But so hats off to that film for staying good and getting better.
Nice.
And then I also, the fun thing I did this weekend, which I think is out in 2 weeks, I spent my whole weekend studying for, unlike our podcast where I can literally just throw some titles on my phone
and does,
and then talk about it. The projection booth, I books their co-hosts like literally, I think let me put it this way, Jump Cut. I was still working at Jump Cut when he asked me to be on it, and we just recorded it on Saturday. It's over Skype because he lives in Detroit.
Ooh, which film did you get to do?
Well, I got to do one of my favorites. He had asked about a bunch that I didn't really care for, but it's Bad Timing, the Nicholas Roeg film, and it's like Possession in terms of, it's very similar. It's a crazy relationship thing with lots of experimental editing. It's very dark. It's probably the darkest relationship drama ever made. It's Garfunkel and Teresa Russell, who is his wife. I watched it about a year ago at Cinefamily again. It's always been one of those movies on my mind. So, but what I wanted is a movie that you'd have to like kind of read up on, because if somebody goes, oh, let's talk for 3 hours about Contact by Jodie Foster, I'm like, I have nothing to say about that. But this film, you would never get tired of discussing it. I mean, it's a little more analytic, this show. Like, it's a little more, they pick one movie, you talk for a couple hours on it. They have, they'll have a little interview with Rogue. They have a little interview with his editor, separate from our hosts. And so it was a fun experience to do something. You only do a one-off, and it was really fun. But it was fun. It did make me think it would be fun for our show at some point to do ones where we just occasionally go just in one horror film that we all just go all the way.
Talk about it the whole way through.
It has to be something rich, but it was a lot of fun. And so I will say this: you will not be able to listen to this thing unless you watch the movie first. It's just pure analysis of a movie. But I would say it's probably going to be really helpful if you watch this. You might find it kind of unwieldy. If you want to watch it, then listen to it, because we really do try to kind of solve mysteries and So it's a lot of fun.
Cool.
I will post on our site when it's up, but I'm pretty sure it's in 2 weeks.
Cool.
And then the last thing, I literally walked out of the theater like a minute before I got here because I was dying to see it and I can never make it. So I left school, left the job, and went straight to 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Going to see it tomorrow night.
No spoilers.
No spoilers at all, because I've read
managed
everything.
to avoid it.
I've avoided
everybody has said it's really good.
Yeah, and everyone keeps commenting
people have been
on the last act
decisive
stuff,
on my end. Yeah,
well, there is some changes.
People love it, people hate it, but
tonally there's some changes between like a lot of films that have twists, right? So I'm not going to go there at all. I will tell you this: it is super enjoyable, an absolute blast. Probably definitely the most fun horror thing I've seen this year, because The Witch isn't fun. It's John Goodman's absolutely fantastic, and look, I have such a crush on what's her name,
Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
The only time she's been miscast was The Thing. That's the only movie, and that's not even her fault that it's bad. She just shouldn't have been. She's too young.
Yeah, it just didn't
work.
But
what was the movie last year with AJ and everyone?
False.
I loved her.
Which is amazing.
She's amazing.
Death Proof. I mean, she's just
Great
one
actress.
of those presents, and this is actually probably the best thing she's. There's some faults. She's really good in this, and the other guy is really good. There's another character. It's kind of a three-person. It's very micro movie, but it's really cool. And besides what you've seen, then I will only say anything that's in the trailer, which is just you get this feeling that these people are trapped together, and John Goodman gets to kind of show off like nice range, but he's also just a great actor.
Yeah.
Because I'm watching it, I'm going, this is the guy from Big Lebowski, and it's like you're nothing like Walter
or Matinee.
Everybody has said that this is like his best performance.
Well,
he's good.
Nothing's better than Lebowski, but it is a very good performance. No, I think people, if you're looking for a fun time, I think you can't go wrong with this movie, and it's getting a huge, like Rotten Tomatoes, I think it's like 90%.
Oh wow! Okay, so I got to try to catch it.
You
this
will not
week.
be disappointed, and perfect way to kind of come in here. So
nice.
So that was good. I didn't watch too much, but it was good stuff.
Bekah?
Nice. Well, mine's been a little spotty because I haven't been. When you have a newborn, they eat every 2 hours, including like straight through the night. So I haven't slept.
What do they eat?
1 star. That sounds like an excuse.
What do they eat? That exactly. Which means every hour and a half, I have to do that for a half an hour.
Right.
So that's I don't sleep more than like 90 minutes at a time now, which means sitting down to watch like an hour and a half long movie, I'm out cold like halfway through, I discovered. But I did do the Q&A for Road Games this past week, new one from IFC. It's definitely a slow burn. It's two people hitchhiking their way through France while there's a serial killer picking up hitchhikers and killing them.
Stacey Keach and Jamie Lee Curtis, right?
No. When they first when I first got the
movie.
email asking me to Q&A Road Games, I was like, are they showing that in 35 millimeter here? That is so badass. And then I was like, okay, I'll do this one too.
Yeah.
But still, definitely a slow burn, but it's got some good stuff. The DP work in it is gorgeous, so I recommend checking it out. I did get the Messiah of Evil Blu-ray from Code Red. Finally, it took me forever to get it, and I decided to start watching it, and I, of course, fell asleep.
That movie, it's like The Beyond. Even if you were awake, it's so good at putting you to sleep.
No matter how beautiful and fantastic and amazing, and it's a wonderful, wonderful movie. I can't recommend it enough. I fell asleep like midway through because I'm just not in the mindset right now to be able to watch that.
Structured. They're structured in such dreamy ways. Like same with The Beyond. That it's so easy. If you're watching that late or if you're overtired, you're just going to be out. It's like, and it's not a fault of the film.
And I was watching it at like 11:30 last Saturday night, and it was like a half an hour in, and I was like, "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever." And I'm just out, and it's just But I highly recommend.
To the baby just watching the rest of the movie. Just eyes are wide open. No milk.
He's like a month old, and he's already seen Messiah of Evil.
He's already seen Messiah of Evil. Come on.
Just watching people eat each other.
What I have been doing, because I only have like an hour-long stretch, and a lot of times I'm just like feeding him or doing other things, and I'm like, I just want to put something on TV. On Blumhouse.com, we've been doing, it's actually Derek has been doing this wonderful
Derek Faraci
has been doing this
Good
great
friend.
series called A Very Spooky Blank, and he goes through all of these old TV shows and discusses the Halloween episode.
Cool.
And so he's looking for like the spookiest ones. And so
and he goes all out. Like he'll go on Amazon and buy that episode. Because he ended his Family Matters on with like, the most horrifying thing is that I paid $2 for this Family Matters.
Which is
Halloween
what
episode.
I've been doing, because I traded in a whole bunch of old stuff that I wasn't going to watch again. Like I own the entire Police Academy collection and traded it into Amazon. So then you get a credit. So like I had like a $50 credit. So I'll be like feeding him, and I'm like, you know what? Let's just watch one of these. And so I've been working my way through his entire A Very Spooky Blank column. Little House on the Prairie, by far the creepiest. There's 2 of them. I think he's only done 1 of them so far, but that one I was like, holy fuck, this played on television. The other one, and I did remember it from my childhood, is the Punky Brewster Halloween episode.
I think
I was like, and he even was like, I can't believe this is a kid's show.
Can you find out for me personally if Dukes of Hazzard ever did Halloween? I would love to know.
I hope so, yeah.
That would be cool.
That would be a good one. But Derek, I have a suggestion for you. Facts of Life did a really freaky one when I was a kid that scared me when I was a kid. So you got to hunt down the Facts of Life Halloween episode. But yeah, I've just been going through these, and I'll like look on Hulu and Netflix for any of the ones he's covered, and then I'm like, I'll buy a Family Matters for $2. So yeah, it's been fun, and it's like a half an hour, and I'm still getting like my horror dose. So, and my last one, which I haven't watched yet, because Rob was giving such love to The Fly 2 last week.
Yes.
I just ordered the DVD. It arrived today. So
saw.
sometime this week, I'm going to watch The Fly 2.
Rewatch too.
And
Is
I would
it
assume
Blu-ray or DVD?
It's
No,
only
it's
DVD.
only on DVD.
Okay.
I heavily hinted to Jeff Nelson that they really needed to release that one.
I don't know
but
if
it's
they,
Fox.
Yeah, I don't know if they can get to Fox stuff.
Yeah.
Fox did a Blu-ray of the first one.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're going to do it. I wish some UK company did an amazing box set with all
Which is
5
like in a
films
pod?
that comes in the telepod.
Oh, cool.
It's beautiful.
Great. Yeah, it opens up and you've got all 5
Blu?
discs.
Yeah.
No, on DVD.
On DVD.
Yeah, years ago. But yeah, we're going to do a Fly episode soon anyway. And the original Vincent Price one is on Netflix Instant.
Yeah.
And then that one's on DVD. And the other Return of the Fly is on the Vincent Price box set that Scream Factory put out. The only one you can't really get is Curse of the Fly, which I think is on a DVD box set somewhere.
Cool.
So yeah,
Anyway.
but we should do a Fly episode. But yeah,
Soon.
I just picked up Fly 2. Can't wait to watch it.
I'm going to go through mine really, really quick. I have been delving ever since the trailer to Sadako versus Kyoka, the Ring versus
Ring
the
versus
Grudge.
I'm still not
Grudge.
sold on this thing.
I don't care. I'm in.
It's
I'm
silly
so
looking,
in.
but it's kind of fascinating
It's
too.
just because they're two like,
They're
like
different.
Japanese apparitions that I can't imagine. Are they going to really fist fight? I can't wait to find out how they do it.
It's like if someone was like, we're going to do Pinhead versus Ash. I'd be like, how?
Exactly,
Yeah.
but I love it, and it's just that shot in the trailer where Kayoko from the Grudge movies just picks up the VHS tape and crushes it with her hand, and I'm like, yes, this is going to be awesome. But anyway,
I would bet that Bruce Ash is actually the one who would have named him Pinhead. He would have had some other like large. He goes, yo, Pinhead, and that would have been actually how he got his name.
Okay, Pinhead versus Leatherface. How about that? That's one that
That's a
you're
little
just
bit more
like,
weird.
I don't know
Silly.
how this would go down.
Yeah.
But long story short, I kind of loved discovering all those Japanese movies kind of in the late 90s, early 2000s when J-horror was starting to become a big thing. So I went back and watched the original Ringu and Rungu 2. It's in a box set with all 4 movies. And you know what I really like? I mean, I also watched the American one this week, and I'm not a fan.
When it came out, I liked it, but I definitely preferred the Japanese.
Yeah, the Japanese, I don't know, I can't explain it. I feel like the American one just delves a little, they try to explain things a little too much more clearer, and
I felt that way about part 2. I didn't like part 2 of the American, you know.
I haven't seen the second one yet. I'm going to watch that this week. But yeah, they kind of, you know, it's the beauty of the original Ring, the Japanese one, is it's pretty simple. Yep. And straightforward, and it's definitely got that folklore. I forgot how great the idea was as you watch this video, and then immediately, like, the one thing that doesn't make any sense, but it's just creepy, is you get a phone call immediately that just says, like, 7 days, or whatever, 1 week, and then that's it. And then you mysteriously
die. And that's outsourced to India, which is weird. Yeah. Like, even from Japan, it's just
that
like...
phone call, yeah.
But I
7
remember
days.
When the DVD came out, and this is like late 90s, because I was still living in Washington, D.C. at the time. I can vividly remember it because it scared me. You can actually, there was a section on the DVD where it would be like, watch the video.
Oh, yeah,
And so you could watch the video, and then exactly like 10 minutes later, if you were still on the DVD in any way, it would stop, shut off, and make the sound of a phone ringing. And I was like, oh, that is so creepy. But whatever it was like, you'd watch that video, and then it would like, you'd keep playing around on the menu. And I remember that it stopped an interview that I was watching, and the phone rang. And it actually sounded like the phone because we all had landlines at the time.
Yeah.
That's cool.
No, it's weird. I mean, you know, it doesn't... I think the American one doesn't hold up at all because of so many reasons, including the technology. But there's just something about that Japanese one. I still think, you know, the conclusion, I don't want to give away what it is, but the finale is pretty much exactly the same in both. Yeah. And for whatever reason, in the Japanese one, I find it terrifying.
It's a really scary movie.
Terrifying. Yeah. I really like that. And then the second one is really crazy and weird, like, because they imply... They don't show you at the end of the first one, but they imply that the lead character is about to do something really horrible. And then the opening of the second one is the death of the character that like, so she did do it. You know, essentially she's trying to save her child, and the only way to do that is to show the tape to somebody else. So at the end of the first one, she's driving to her elderly father's place. And I'm kind of like, it's either the father or the kid, huh? That's me.
That's all you can come up with. You can't give it to a neighbor or
no,
random guy on the street and be like, if you watch this, I'll give you $1 million.
Yeah.
I don't have to do that now. You're dead.
So the second one picks up right from there, and you're like, that's pretty messed up.
I haven't seen that since theaters.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that again, actually. I'll watch both of those.
Same thing with The Grudge, too. I remember I loved the first Grudge, and then the second one I was like...
American or Japanese?
American.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I've seen the Japanese Grudge.
Yeah, that Ju-on is really good too.
Yeah, I gotta watch that.
I'm gonna go through all of them now. Yeah, that's the thing. It's been so long that it's almost like a nice little time capsule to that period of horror.
Definitely Audition is the one of all that made the biggest impression on me at the time. Like Audition just kind of knocked my socks off. Because that's almost more like a Ben Wheatley film. Because Miki is kind of like that.
There was a whole bunch of like the J and K horrors that came out around that time that were very art dread that I absolutely loved. Like
well, Tartan was putting the Tartan DVD labels putting them all out. And they were great.
There was one called Akiya that was amazing. There was one called Cinderella that I remember loving. Yeah. There was like a whole bunch of them that came out from Tartan Asian, like back to back. There was one called Cello.
I remember Cello.
That were just all phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean,
was there a Japanese Dark Water, or was that South Korean?
That was, I think
saw
that
the
was
American one. I never saw the
I think that was Japanese.
Yeah, it was a little confusing because then Tartan just became Tartan Asia Extreme.
Yeah.
So then, like, they would do Tale of Two Sisters, which was Korean. Yeah. I think
Memento Mori. They did.
Coma was Chinese, maybe.
They
just
did a lot of the
all.
Hong Kong ones as well.
Yeah,
because there was some Hong Kong ones coming out then too.
But yeah, there was some fascinating stuff. And you know what? I've never seen now. Once I get through the Ring and Grudge movies, the original Japanese ones, I've never seen the original Pulse or the original Shudder.
The original Pulse, Cairo is amazing.
That's what I hear. They're great.
Destroys the American remake of Pulse. Like the American remake of Pulse is just crap. The original is brilliant.
Yeah.
Just phenomenal.
Maybe me and you should rewatch that. I'm not sure if I've seen that. I've seen the American.
It's bleak,
it's
but
that
it's
Kurosawa
gorgeous.
guy, right? Kiyoshi Kurosawa. And he did a lot of good ones.
There's another series that you would probably like. I think it's Korean, called the Whispering Corridors or Wishing Stairs. There's a couple of them, but I really liked those when they came out.
Did you guys ever see the Death Note series? I never have.
No, I never got into it.
I know Wingard is doing that.
Oh, really? Interesting.
But like a big studio one.
Oh, wow.
Part of the, somebody requested, one one of our listeners requested we do a Japanese horror episode soon. So this is the first step there, is I'm trying to revisit a lot of that stuff so we can kind of refresh our memories and talk about it.
I wish they'd put more of those on Netflix now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah,
Tartan
most
Asian,
are, some are on
happened,
Netflix, some are on Amazon Prime. Like, I know Ju-on 2 is on Amazon Prime to stream for free, but then you could rent things like Pulse and Shudder, the original Pulse and Shudder. So they're all on my queue to watch at some point. So.
All I know is what I learned from Visitor Q, which is always carry an umbrella. And if you've seen Visitor Q, you'll know what I mean.
Totally.
Keeps that urine
We
off.
got to do a Bollywood episode, too, because a couple of weeks ago, Dave did his top 10 Bollywood horrors for the site. And so I ended up watching a whole bunch of these.
Really? I've never seen one.
Yeah.
Never seen an Indian
there were some that I was like, okay, well, that's very cultural. I don't think I get it. But then there was some. There's actually one that's on Amazon Prime called 1920 that was amazing. There's one called 13A, which Elric, you would love because it's so trippy. It's a man. He's by himself. He's home alone. His kids and wife are out, and he turns on the TV, and a soap opera starts playing that shows how his wife and children will die.
Oh, cool.
But he has to keep watching the soap opera to see how he needs to stop it.
Oh, cool.
And the whole thing is totally
and then
trippy.
it bursts into song.
Surprisingly, very few songs.
That's a
They do have
Miike.
the biggest. They have the biggest film industry in the world.
Yeah,
They make the most movies.
There was one. It translated to, I think it was Rat, but that was a really good one. Yeah, there was a whole bunch that I was like, man, these are just good.
I've got the documentary about Jennifer Lynch trying to make her film.
Oh, Hiss?
Right there, that Rodman Flender sent me because he said it's like the best documentary on a woman trying to get a film made in a really misogynist country and stuff. I haven't watched it yet, so maybe I'll put that on.
I want to
top
see
of
that
my list. We can watch it.
Because Hiss,
Cool.
I mean, Hiss is not that great of a film, but I remember that
the making of looked great.
Weekend of Horrors, right after that came out, they had the lead actress from that come to do like an interview, and she was there live at the convention, and we had a fan base that I didn't even know existed that just showed up to see her. She's gorgeous. She's absolutely amazing. But it was like this Bollywood film fanatic group kind of crawled out of the woodwork and came to the convention just to see her.
I'd love to see a list, and you guys could probably actually do this, with your site, but a list of like horror films from every country, but not the obvious places. Like, what about the places that maybe have never? I'd like to almost know which countries have never made a horror film. Which nations have never even gone into that kind of darker territory?
Like,
I'd just be curious. Some of the more obscure places,
like Indonesia, has a really fascinating horror scene going on.
Thailand,
Philippines.
You'll occasionally see something, but like in Iceland, we know, and Sweden and stuff. But there's got to be a bunch of places there'll be something, but we've just never even heard of it. Probably South America. There'll probably be some things that are from there.
There's plenty from South America.
Yeah.
That would be like the Coffin Joe stuff is South America.
No, and I know Argentinian stuff.
Send us your recommendations if you haven't.
Yeah.
What's
From
the weirdest country
you've
seen a horror movie from? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just curious. I think that'd be cool. We could do a round the world episode, like looking at every country and try to.
Yeah.
Sure.
That'd be fun.
All righty. Well, grab a beer if you have one. We're going to whip up our guest.
And there is a connection to Hong Kong.
All right. So we are back with our very, very special guest who worked on I was saying, I usually cite this as my favorite movie of all time. It's kind of neck and neck with Psycho. It always goes back and forth. But you did work on Evil Dead 2, which is one of my favorite movies. Mr. Mark Shostrom is with us. Welcome.
He also
Hello.
did
Thank you.
I would definitely say one of my two favorite movies, Videodrome.
Worked for Rick Baker on that.
Yeah.
Long
I had
ago.
questions about that.
We have lots of questions for Mark.
Not a bad one to learn from. I'd say Rick Baker's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, you could say that.
But I've known you for a little while now. I actually was fortunate enough to chat with you for the Evil Dead 2 Blu-ray, the documentary that's on there. But I've never really talked to you about kind of the beginning, where this all happened, getting into the movie industry, having a love of effects in general, because I think all of us at some point fall in love with movie monsters and that stuff. So what was the beginning for you? When did you fall in love with the genre?
Before any of you were born. 1965, seeing Bride of Frankenstein. Actually, I was 9 at the time, and I read in TV Guide that a movie called Bridge of Frankenstein was on, and it was a typo in TV Guide, and I thought, Bridge, Frankenstein, that's a war movie about some Germans guys, I'm going to watch it, and it turned out to be Bride of Frankenstein, and that kind of hooked me. And it was a couple of years later when I saw Planet of the Apes on the big screen that it really grabbed me, because I'd never seen anything like that. I was there in 1968 when it came out in April. And, first thing I saw was John Chambers' name in the beginning of the movie, and I'd never seen a makeup artist's name in the beginning titles of the movie, like right after Charlton Heston. I thought, there's something going on here.
Yeah.
And of course, when the first gorillas appear on the horses, I'm like, oh my God.
So many people cite that the original Planet of the Apes, especially effects artists, of being like one of the most mind blowing things to happen to movies at that time period.
Well, I think we're all familiar with Frankenstein and whatnot, but long before the days of VHS and whatnot, Planet of the Apes came out at a time when most of us in the effects business were very impressionable young kids, 10, 12, 13, whatever, or younger. Mm-hmm. And it was one that we could see in the movie theaters. It was a first-run, huge Hollywood movie, and it was, mind-blowing. Everything about it, every production value about it was just top-notch. And, of course, when the makeup comes on, it changed 1,000 young kids' lives. It became monster makers, stop-motion animators, writers, directors.
Mm-hmm. At that time period, how did you get information about like makeup stuff? I mean, were there magazines and how hard is it for a kid to?
Back then, we had Famous Monsters. Thank God for Forey Ackerman. And it didn't have too much technical information. Occasionally, they'd come out with an article about quote unquote Hollywood makeup artist Dick Smith. That's why I moved to L.A., but he lived in New York. Like, what the hell? As far as information, a few books from the library. Mm-hmm. There weren't any, how-to videos. There was no video. It was like you learned from a few magazines. They had a Life magazine article about Planet of the Apes, but they weren't big on technical information. It was mostly, promotion and photographs. Mm-hmm. It was learn by doing. Get a book on makeup, try it out, fuck it up a few times, figure out what you did wrong.
Right. And it's interesting. I know Elric wanted to bring this up, but so where are you from originally? Because you've kind of been all over the place.
I was born in the Midwest, and my dad was with the government, and so he hopped around a lot. We moved overseas to Hong Kong in 1970. I was there for the longest period of time, then came back to America in 77, 78.
So when Hong Kong was still not part of China?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
It was British Hong Kong.
British Hong Kong.
So very confusing. It was,
now it's Chinese.
It was British Hong Kong back then.
Yeah.
But you were there during a great burst of films then.
Yes and no. It was I was there during the whole Bruce Lee heyday. In fact, a couple of friends of mine trained with Bruce Lee, and that was back when I took Kung Fu myself, and that was back when they didn't teach white people. Bruce Lee was, if you thought he was huge in America, you should have gone to see his movies first run in Hong Kong. They were just amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, it put him on the map globally. So as far as movies, Hong Kongers love movies. So I think my record was 11 movies in a weekend, from a Friday through a Sunday night, because you had Kung Fu movies, you had European movies, spaghetti westerns, American first run, British first runs. You had films from everywhere. So it would just be check any genre out. They had it everywhere.
You probably would have been around the same time as Wong Kar-wai.
No, this is before that.
Oh, really? Before he was? No, I mean when he was probably your age. I mean he was probably
sitting in the theater behind me.
Yeah, you're probably sitting with Wong Kar-wai.
There's that guy with his feet on the back of the chair. I said, "Get your feet on."
Another cineast. I read something that connected you to Karloff's. Was it Karloff's wife?
Yes.
What was that story? I'm curious about that.
Well, I had just moved to Hong Kong. Boris Karloff, as you know, died in February '69. This was about a year later, maybe the summer of '70. And we were living in an apartment building in a place called Repulse Bay. We were on the 13th floor. Next door to us was a place called the Repulse Bay Hotel. I read in the paper that Mrs. Karloff was in town visiting friends, and it said she's staying at the Repulse Bay Hotel. I mean, literally, I could stand on my balcony and look out into the veranda of the hotel. So I'm 13 years old. I asked my dad, what do I do? And he goes, well, write her a note, and we'll bring some flowers. And I did that, and she called me, and I got to meet her that night.
Wow. What a cool story.
It was great, and I met with her twice, and we ended up becoming pen pals for about 20 years.
Wow.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Wow, what a wonderful...
when I go back, when I look back now, I was 13. I thought it was cool. Yeah. Here's Boris Karloff's wife. She's talking to me, and she's telling me all these wonderful stories. You go back, look at it 45 years later. I wish I'd asked such and such a question,
Yeah. Wow, that's great. That's amazing that she would just be that open to someone that young.
She was a wonderful person.
That's very cool.
And then, so when you came back to the States, how soon after that did decide to get into movie making? Was it always that path, or were there other things you thought about?
I'm kind of like you. I was doing music and my makeup at the same time, and I was doing both when I moved back to America. I was doing both since the early 70s or late 60s, music and makeup. And when I decided to come to L.A., it was kind of pursuing both of those, and whichever happened faster.
Right.
And that's how it happened.
How'd you get your first feature start? And was it assisting people? And did you kind of go up the apprentice model, or? My
first feature was not a feature. It was an AFI short. And I got it because basically I was walking down the street. I had a day job, normal job. I was very unhappy with it. I had 2 quarters in my pocket, and they had drama logs on these, little metal kiosks. You put in 25 cents or 50 cents, and you get drama log. And back then they had job listings mostly for actors, but I opened it up and it said, makeup artist needed for AFI, American Film Institute short, must be able to do scars. And I got the job, and the film ended up winning an Oscar.
Oh, wow.
So my makeup was shown at the Oscars. My parents are in India watching the Oscars. They're, "Oh, you did that?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't win the Oscar, but I did the scar that the girl wears." So
that's great. Now, your first film, is that To All a Good Night?
I think that was, yes.
I have the VHS tape of it. I've never watched it.
I'm so sorry.
I have many questions about it.
I've never actually watched it.
David Hess as a director is very interesting to me.
David was wonderful. He had so much energy and enthusiasm. He was a great guy. He was a wonderful guy.
That's essentially, I was going to condense it all because I think it was last Christmas, they put it out on Blu-ray. And believe it. By the way,
costs a lot.
Mark's face was just in shock when I said the word Blu-ray about that movie. But
wow.
But no, I mean, there's things about it that I find really interesting and that I like. It's a weird movie because there's day for night, but they didn't light it properly. So they're literally on the Blu-ray, they are literally out in the daylight, and they're like, "God, we better go in before
the plane sequence."
Yes, all that stuff.
Looked funky.
It all looks kind of weird.
But we did shoot a lot at night.
Okay,
mostly at night.
But what I find fascinating about it is, so this is 1980, and it's before. There's a lot of, I don't want to give away too many of the twists for people that haven't seen it, but there's a lot of twists and things in it that are very reminiscent of Friday the 13th, which came
Are
you
later. Surprised? Well,
yeah, very.
I think they were going, harkening back to. The slasher genre had sort of been around before Friday the 13th, so they were probably picking bits and pieces of what worked or they thought worked before.
Right.
Just my theory.
There's that, the Santa Killer, it's kind of, I think, well, actually, no. I was going to say that was the first time, but then Tales from the Crypt had a version of the Santa Killer. So, all right, I just answered my own question. Thanks.
What about the ones that you're some of the ones that I've always loved, Slumber Party Massacre, or obviously we're talking about Videodrome. What were they more like the assistant jobs where you're learning and supporting someone, or how do those jobs work?
Some films I did myself, some I was assisting, some I worked on for a few days, some for a few months. For example, To All Good Night, I was doing that whole thing myself. I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was making friends in the business back then, Dave Miller being probably the main guy. And we would all kind of network. And, for example, on Slumber Party Massacre, I worked one night on that, making a fake arm that gets cut off or something. And that's where I met Rick Lazzarini, and that led to a whole, a lot of other jobs down the road. Videodrome was working for Rick Baker, working with the same guys from American Werewolf. They had just finished that. It was before Rick got an Oscar. And I met him by a pure fluke. It was just this amazing thing. And he hired me for, working on the Flesh TVs mostly. Mm-hmm. And that was cool. That was an eye-opener. And that was a turning point because I got to see all the American Werewolf stuff, and it was fresh from filming. It was just pristine. The actual change-o heads, the body, everything. And just seeing that up close, it looked 100% real. And nothing I had seen up to that point had looked 100% real. So that made a real impression on me.
Uh-huh.
Were you involved in the kind of final part where the Flesh TV's spewing up all the intestines?
No, that was all shot in Canada. Uh-huh. I worked strictly here in Van Nuys, actually.
Oh, wow.
Not Van Nuys. It was not far from here in Sherman Way at Rick's old shop.
Oh, and that's where they made a lot of it?
Yeah, we made all the stuff there.
What was the Flesh TV made of? It always looked like it was like a neoprene material.
Well, no, the actual Flesh TV... except for the screen, the Flesh TV was made of a material called Smooth-On 724, which is a stretchy urethane.
Oh, that company's still around.
Yeah, the same material that Rick used for the werewolf heads, was for the TVs. The exact same material.
Okay.
Where this is kind of in that time period. You mentioned Slumber Party Massacre. Yeah. Did you kind of dabble in that Corman world at all? Because obviously a lot of people.
I did, and that was a blast. I don't know who got me my first job. It was on Forbidden World.
Yeah.
And I met so many wonderful people there. Bart Mixon probably being the top guy. Met John Beekler. John was giving a lot of people their shots, and of course Corman was churning out monster movies all the time. And it was a great period. I wish I'd worked on more than two.
Mm-hmm. Did you like that pressure of working fast? I imagine that must have been pretty intense, his films, his turnarounds.
Well, I guess I must have. I didn't have time to think about it. I just remember there was a lot of work, there was long hours, and it was a blast.
Now, was Beastmaster one of his?
No.
That was a different one?
Yeah, that's Coscarelli later.
Wynorski did one of them, too.
Oh, yeah, he did.
But
the Corman ones were, I did Forbidden World and Android. And they were shooting other things at the same time. It was a cool place to work.
And did it just seem, because I talked to a lot of both actors and effects guys, people that worked a lot in that time period. Did it just seem like there was a never-ending flow of work? Because it just seemed like there was
a never-ending flow of work.
Uh-huh.
It would be great if it was like that today. It's a little different.
Yeah, so there was one film, and I asked you just before we started, because we do on Brian Sauer's every end of the year, his website, Rupert Pupkin, he asks us our favorite discoveries. And I had, from the Nightmare USA book, there was a great chapter in it on a film called The Black Room, and I was like, I've never heard of this film, and couldn't find it. It doesn't exist on DVD. So I bought a VHS copy. I think it was like $45, and I never do that. So there's something about the cover that entranced me. And it wasn't worth it. I'll be upfront. I'm not going to lie to you. It wasn't worth it. Don't do it. Don't do this. But if you can get a cheap copy. But I did really like it. There's something about it. It's very sexual. I think you even say, it's got a kind of sleazy quality. But it's also kind of interesting because it's set in L.A. and kind of the hills of L.A. And it's a married guy who's got a wife and family. And he's like, I want to set up a little writer room and rent out his place at somebody else's house. But it's actually used for his sexcapades, and he tells the people he's going to be bringing women there, and they kind of deck it out for him, but he doesn't realize they're kind of maybe vampires.
What's the name of this again?
It's called The Black Room.
The Black Room.
So the Black Room is the room that he's doing his thing in, and the other people who live there are watching him, and kind of they have this vampiric situation going on. And it's just one of those movies. It's kind of hard to describe, to be honest. Beyond that, I can't really pinpoint what I liked about it.
Well, you know more about it than me.
That's right. I probably know more than you've forgotten, right?
I don't think I've seen the whole film.
Oh wow!
I just
do you remember what you did on the film?
I do remember, and I remember again. This is during the period of 12 Good Night. I really didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what materials to use for whatnot. And there was a scene where they're siphoning some guy's blood out of his arm, and I had to make these sections of a fake arm, and they weren't perfect. Let's put it that way. But I did devise an interesting way of doing this whole blood transfusion, optical illusion, or magic trick or whatnot. I just remember it was not a great experience. I met some cool people there. Karen Golden, the script supervisor, Bob Harmon, who went on to do The Hitcher.
Yeah, he was like a Steadicam operator, and the most memorable moment in the movie is like a shot where a victim runs away and the Steadicam follows for like a good couple minutes. A chase scene. It takes you out of the location, which is nice. Yeah,
I was on set for, I did a little bit of prep for a couple of weeks and was on set for 2 or 3 days. There was a certain sleaze factor to it because one of the producers decided he would be an actor as well, and it was for a sex scene. So here's your producer walk in, who shall remain nameless, and he just takes his clothes off. And he's walking by. I'm like, welcome to Hollywood.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
How was the director? Because I've never seen anything else by that guy. That's the only film that I can...
There's your answer.
There's classic. You've heard it here first.
That's diplomatic.
But it was actually, I'm not kidding when I say it was kind of a thrill when I'm looking over filmography and there's all these movies I love, but that's the movie where my eyes light up and I'm like, Black Room.
Typical Elric.
What? Sex room with vampires?
Hey, speaking
Elric's
of sex
there.
rooms, you also worked with Stuart Gordon on a film that's almost equally, like, even though it's a great movie, it's equally got that sleazy but bizarro factor, which is From Beyond.
Oh, yes. That was great. That was a wonderful...
I've always told people, I believe, next to Society, I think it's the goopiest... It's the film you most feel like you need a shower after watching.
It's
True.
just that
but
weird,
there's nothing sleazy about it. It's
the character. He the bad guy, feels like... It's like makes you feel weird sexually.
Because she puts on that weird S&M outfit and like totally gropes him while he's like all burned. It's kind of
it's
weird.
Funny. I just went on Twitter recently and I put a picture I don't know why I put it up, but it was a picture of the Pretorius monster I did, and there was Barbara Crampton lying on the floor, kneeling on the floor with like a fire extinguisher, and she's in her bondage outfit. And the caption I put was, rubber monsters, bondage gear, and slime. What else do you need? And I got like 5,000 hits immediately.
And I'm sure Barbara retweeted because she's
she
had her
enjoyed
own
it.
resurgence too. But the creatures. It's one of effects-wise, it's actually one of the most, I think, amazing films. Like it really holds up. It's other. It feels like you're going to that Lovecraft world. Of things that we couldn't have imagined in our mind.
It's just bizarre. There's no other film like it that I can think of.
Doctor.
It doesn't fit into any genre or subgenre. It's just bizarre.
It's more than sci-fi, more than horror. It's like you said, it's its own genre.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about it because as a compliment, I know a diehard horror fan that listens to the show, I'm not going to call them out, that says they've seen it once and they can never watch it again because it's just too gross. And I think that's a wonderful compliment to the effects. But how did because you're adapting from Lovecraft, and obviously Stuart Gordon has his ideas, you have your ideas. How do you come up with what I still think are some of the most radical things I've seen in a horror movie ever?
Well, it came about basically, I've read a lot of Lovecraft by then. I'd read a lot of his short stories, which are not short. So I was familiar with it. We had a deadline for Stuart to go to Italy and start shooting, and he had a production designer down at Empire doing these wonderful color illustrations of here's what the creature could look like, but they weren't practical because there wasn't a whole lot of money, and it had to be something we could actually make. And it was kind of a last-ditch effort. I did some sketches, I did some sculptures, and finally, right before Stuart was about to leave for Italy, he and his wife came out to my studio, and I had just sculpted the twisted pretzel of the Pretorius monster as kind of a last-ditch, this would be cool. And he loved it, so it was kind of a last-minute decision of something. I had to come up with something really different. And I think just by not thinking about it and just sculpting it in a few hours, it worked.
Wow.
How did you meet Stuart? How did you get involved with?
Oh, that's funny how that happened. I heard they were doing... I'd worked on a movie called The Supernaturals, and we shot some inserts in...
the Civil War one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Civil War zombies.
Never heard of that one.
Yeah.
Huh.
And
It's
better than The Black
VHS.
Room.
I don't know if it made it to DVD.
Put it on your list.
You haven't seen the whole movie. I'll lend you my VHS.
I went through the experience. We were shooting inserts of The Supernaturals in like January '85, and right across from the insert stage we were at, in another stage, there was a headless body laying against a wall with his intestines spewing out. I went over there wondering, well, it's not a love story. What are they shooting? And it was they were shooting inserts for Reanimator. I heard about Stuart Gordon. I might have met him. I don't think I did. But I heard later, right after I finished Nightmare on Elm Street 2, that Stuart was doing another movie called From Beyond that was Lovecraft. And I thought, this will be cool. And I actually went to Empire Pictures in my Volkswagen with Bart Mixon. We took the Mark Patton dummy and walked in to meet Ryan Usna and Stuart Gordon, saying, here's what we can do. We want this job. And we got
That's cool.
That's great.
That's crazy.
Great lesson to how to get a gig.
Well, I wouldn't
Don't do that now. They'll arrest
Don't do it
you.
now. Yeah.
That's not LA anymore, sadly.
Just bring Mark Patton with you.
Yeah.
The actual guy.
That was a Volkswagen, a small car, so we only brought half the dummy.
Well,
fair.
if we can go back briefly, you just mentioned Nightmare 2. And I grew up in the Nightmare films and I love them, but what was it like at that period? Because did you do a little bit of work on the first one too?
I worked in Dave Miller's garage for about a week, running all the Freddy foam rubber and sculpting some stuff for Ronnie Blakely, her corpse coming out of the bed, which we ended up not using.
Right.
So at the time, Dave and I, we didn't have any clue it would be a big movie or a franchise.
I guess that's the thing. It's like when you're doing the second one, you're like, all right, they're making a part 2 or whatever. I mean, now it's on my phone. It's a cultural phenomenon.
Well, when I went to see the movie, I remember it was great. It was huge. The audience loved it. And I was with Bart Mixon again. I went to see it with him, and we just looked at each other and said, if they make a sequel, we got to work on it. And as it turned out, my old roommate, Michael Murphy, was one of the producers.
Oh, okay.
Bob Shea hired him to produce it. And I hadn't even thought about, well, are they doing a sequel? And Michael called me out of the blue and said, hey, we're doing the sequel to Nightmare on Elm Street. you want to come in and talk? I'm like, yeah.
And Part 2 is the nastiest. I mean, Part 2 is, and in terms of effects, I mean, there are things that are actually disturbing, not just like fun disturbing like some of the sequels, but like the idea of Freddy actually emerging out of a person is quite disturbing, and it's really well done.
Yeah, and I believe that's one of the main things you were responsible for was the
that was
transformation.
My main thing for the whole movie.
Yeah, and I mean, how do you approach something like that? Because obviously there's been, there's monster transformations, like there's werewolf transformations, that sort of thing.
Well, even back then they were getting a bit overdone. All the stretchy stuff, all the bladders, so you had to be careful about what you don't want to repeat other people.
Yeah, I thought that one was it's the only one in the series that has that version of Freddy, and the idea of him emerging from the guy's stomach and kind of pretty cool.
It was in the script that he kind of tears out, but it wasn't specific, and director Jack Shoulder wanted to have a slow build-up, and he wanted to have Mark Patton in a Freddy sweater with literally balloons under the sweater.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Like, okay. And I had a different idea, which was a little bit more dynamic, which I sold Bob Shea on.
Yeah. I think it works. I mean, I think it's disturbing. And I saw in the credits that you actually got to play Freddy's hand for one of those effects, so you are one of the Freddy
I have
Kruegers.
credit for that?
Yeah.
How come I don't get royalties?
I don't know. I can't.
You were Freddy's hand.
You actually emerged out of
Freddy.
them, right?
No, that was actually Robert Englund coming out, but I had to portray the hand for
different part.
Cutting and moving and whatnot. It's traditionally. I mean, you always have the effects person who creates the effect operate critical things that an actor may not be able to get.
You're one of my favorite Freddys. That'll make you sleep well.
It will.
Do you want to ask about that fantastic Blu-ray that we both just got?
Oh yeah, well, you worked on Beastmaster too, Beastmaster 1, right?
Beastmaster 1.
The reason I want to ask that, and I don't know if you did this, of all the monsters when I was young, besides Creepshow was the first film that I saw, but the first creature I really remember seeing that like just unnerved me was the one that would wrap you up and then like shake and then spit out bones.
Doesn't sound familiar.
Okay.
No, I did some witch makeups on that.
Okay, cool. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I really don't even remember the film that well. I just remember that creature doing this weird thing where it sucked your bones dry.
The only thing I remember from Beastmaster is that they kept gouging eyeballs out and that there was a monster who ate them. And that may have been Beastmaster 2. But again, it kicked ass when I was a kid, so I still remember that.
But let's talk about the Arrow release of a movie. Probably the best release I've ever seen of a movie that it's shocking that it would get like this almost 3-disc, beautiful transfer, million commentaries, tons of extra features. I mean, it looks astounding because I saw this movie on VHS, kind of like how I saw Black Room years ago. Before, like, I really had ever heard anyone really talk about it. And I remember going, oh, this performance is really just like, this is a rough movie. But then it gets to these actual kills. And one of them's actually maybe my favorite of all time, which is the crazy, there's a crazy kind of, not a chainsaw, but it's like a saw of some kind. It's just the actor.
I thought you were going to say the
fish hook.
They're all good. But for some reason, it was the amount of blood and the screaming of the guy kind of just flailing around. But so the Mutilator's gotten this amazing Arrow video release. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago. How did you get that gig? Because that's a first-time filmmaker who had never done anything before, right?
Yes, I had actually been working a lot with a guy named Anthony Shao. He's a makeup effects guy, a sculptor. And he got a call from a special effects friend of his who Buddy Cooper had called because he saw his name in the phone book under special effects. And the thing is, Anthony and I had sort of partnered up on a few projects before, and he found out about the Mutilator. And he wouldn't give me the information. I said, well, come on, let's go into it together. And he just resisted. He wanted to get the job himself, but he really didn't have a portfolio. And I knew all about photography and presentation. And I finally twisted his arm enough. We decided to go into it together. And I sent Buddy a copy of my portfolio, and we got the job pretty much overnight. I went into it as partners, but Anthony had to bail not far into it. So I finished.
It became like a big job for you.
Yeah, it was a big job in the beginning, yeah.
But like each kill is just so totally different. I mean, it's such a weird movie. The guy's the father's hunting them all down, and each one, the kind of weaponry is just so outlandish. I mean, one time it's an axe.
Giant fish hook.
Yeah, giant
he picked fishing implements, and that was very deliberate on his part.
What, use an axe to kill a fish?
Well, the axe is
You use it
the
to
axe
scale the
will not be
fish.
included, but the fish hook, the outboard motor, all that stuff.
Oh, that's what the motor was. But what are your memories from working on that? Because I mean, I assume it's pretty low budget in terms of financing.
It was. I know from Buddy's stress level and the unexpected things that the budget went up quite a lot. It was actually, I will say this, the most fun I've ever had on a movie ever.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Was it shot near here?
It was shot in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it has a great opening song.
That's
song
actually,
is catchy.
it is catchy.
It's catchy. You'll be singing it after the movie.
You know what's funny? It's on the menu, and I put the disc on while I was like doing dishes or something. And I was like,
You'll start
this
humming it.
Fucking song! I mean, start this movie.
But it's weird because
stuck in my head.
did it like what kind of relief? Because this isn't one that was. I don't think is for the hardcore horror fans have maybe heard of it or seen it, but I don't think most people have, and they will now. But like, what was its release like? Did it help your career? Did it bump you to the next gig at the time, or not really?
I thought it would get me Friday the 13th Part 3 or 4.
Oh, yeah, it's the same kind of thing.
It didn't, yeah. And actually, Buddy had a hard time releasing it because of the ratings and the gore. And he couldn't find a distributor for it. It was very tough for him.
Well, you've got the guy. There's a guy. I won't put a spoiler. I won't tell you who it is. But there's a guy with towards the end with no legs, and he's cutting in half. And it's
that'll
really
do it.
Brilliantly. I mean, really, the effects and the kills in this are better than most. Really, probably better than all the Friday 13th in terms of the kills.
Well,
overall.
I worked hard to make them different and really well executed, and I shot lots of pictures. In fact, I shot a whole bunch of Polaroids of continuity, and I walked into the. I don't know if I called them. I think I called the office for Friday the 13th Part whatever. And I said, I've already done this. I've done it better. Hire me. But they didn't. They hired a certain other effects artist who was famous at the time.
That's how it worked.
Oh, that guy.
Do you have any particular ones you were fond of from Mutilator, like ones that you just like had to go outside the box to create a crazy effect?
It's a small thing which you'll probably never notice. There's a scene where the father, Big Ed's on top of the car when the levers are trying to escape, but right before they back up into the wall and cut him in half. There's a scene where Pam takes a cigarette lighter and heats it up. He's trying to strangle, the hand's coming down through the roof.
She burns his hand, yeah.
She burns his hand, and I just found out about a new material that Dick Smith had used for cutting effects in the Sentinel. I tried that. So basically I made up Jack Chatham's hand with this dark pigment and put the fake skin over it, which would be flexible. And you could actually plunge a cigarette lighter into it. And I had a tube going to a cigarette, and I was blowing smoke as she drug it.
Oh, that is a really good.
This will make you
that was
happy
one of my.
That I was watching the ending with a friend a couple days ago, Dick Grinnard, and that's the moment where both of us turn to each other and go, "Whoa!" like that. Because
really?
And it goes.
I was very proud of that.
Well, no, but I really think
cool.
sometimes it's the small moments. I remember in Hellraiser, there's a moment where he's bringing a mattress into the house.
And he hits
and he cuts himself in the nail.
Yeah.
That moment, I think the moment where in not Child's Play, Pet Sematary, where they cut the. Cut his Achilles heel. Those little things that could actually happen, I feel like they're so much more painful to watch.
Yeah, Evil Dead, the remake, it's where she hits her head on the toilet.
That's right. That's something you can feel rather than somebody being split in half looks optically amazing, but you can't really imagine.
You can't relate to it.
Yeah, you can't relate to it.
The guy getting his spoiler.
Yeah.
The guy getting his leg cut off.
Yeah.
You can't relate to that, but you can relate to being burned.
Yeah,
Now,
that's a really great moment.
With this, did the director give you kind of license over what the kill scenes were? Did he just say kill this person, or did you have
it was
use
all
an
in the
axe
script.
and it's going to go
It was
here?
all very specific. The girl on the workbench with the fishing hook in her bleep.
Yeah,
pretty nasty.
That was very specifically.
So it's Buddy's dark imagination.
Yes, I wouldn't say dark. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah,
most people in horror are. Right?
We always
know
talk
that.
about that. Yeah, it's kind of fun, surprising.
So was this the movie that, at what point did you kind of set up your own shop? When did you feel it was time to make that step?
Probably the year after. Mm-hmm. No, actually, it was right after I got back from Mutilator, about 83 or 84. I rented a little kind of double art studio, about the size of this room, maybe double. And that was the first one.
Right. Yeah, a little room like this with chemicals.
Lots of
like
chemicals.
you said, back then there was a constant influx of work. Everybody was working on lots of things all the time, so there was never any question of, can I afford this little place? And then I expanded in 1985 and did a whole building, and I was never concerned about the work coming in.
Well, you talked about how Planet of the Apes for your generation is what pushed a lot of people, but definitely, as Rob said earlier, for our generation, I don't know anyone who probably Evil Dead 2 and Reanimator are two of those movies that if you saw at that age, they really just made a huge influence and impact.
Well, I mean, I've said it a million times on the show. The thing that I love about Evil Dead 2, I've always loved horror, but that was the first movie where I sort of got it. Like, oh, I know how they did that. I think maybe they shot it in reverse, or maybe they did this with that. It was like the first time that I started breaking down how gags on camera and effects were done, because I'm like, that's so cool. Maybe I can do that with my friends in my VHS camera.
Well, you realize at one point, at some point, if you study enough film, all these things are like one big magic trick.
Yes.
Whether it's makeup or camera work, optical, special effects, whatnot. It's all a big magic trick.
What was that experience like, though? Because there's so many different types of gags used in Evil. I mean, Evil Dead 2 literally has, to me, like everything in the kitchen sink. When blood's just pouring on them, it's like literally everything has been done in this film.
It was an exhausting movie. I was on that 7 days a week for 6 months. And
wow.
When I got on the plane to come to L.A., man, I was just wiped.
How'd you get it in the first place? How'd you get in?
I pursued it. Now, a lot of people in the business, have this misconception that, it was somebody else's show, somebody who shall remain nameless, other effects people. But actually, I pursued that show. I saw Evil Dead 1 in a theater with my friend Phil Duffin, who ended up becoming the production designer, and I loved it. And I heard through the grapevine or in a magazine they were thinking about a sequel, and I wrote to Sam Raimi and sent him a whole package of photographs. I didn't know how to contact him, so I wrote to the distributor, an old guy in New York named Erwin Shapiro.
Yeah, they told some great stories about him not long ago.
Wonderful guy. And I talked to him on the phone. He said, you pass it along, I'll make sure Sam gets it. And he did. And apparently Sam had hired somebody else, an East Coast makeup effects guy with not too much experience. He already told the guy, you've got the job. And Sam was on a plane to Rome to meet with Dino about financing for the film. And he opened my package and he thought, wait, I want this guy. So I got a call from Sam when he came back, and he had to basically unhire the person he said he had the job because he wanted me. He thought I was a so-called professional, and I was at that point.
So-called.
A young, eager, not terribly experienced, but 5 or 6 years of experience, and hardworking. So I basically pursued the job and got it, and then I hired the rest of my team.
What were the biggest challenges? Well, which effects gave you guys the biggest headaches and biggest challenges?
It was just the sheer number. It was a constant. There's so many things, so many little things. And I guess it was the little things that would kind of catch you up because you would tend to forget about them or think, oh, that's so small, I'll worry about that later. Well, we're shooting it tomorrow. I'm like, fuck.
Yeah, I mean, the sheer volume, if you think about it, of what happens in that movie.
It's just, that's what it's built out of. It's a chase scene where every single 5 seconds is a new effect.
Well, the crazy thing was when I first read the script, Sam gave it to me, I was just almost overwhelmed with the number of effects. And I called Sam, and I said, we really need to talk about all this in detail. And he couldn't make it out to my place. And we did the whole script from page 1 to 110 over the phone, and I had a pen and pencil. And I remember it was daylight when we started, and the sun went down, got darker, and it was late at night when we finished. But he broke down every effect, every scene, every shot, he knew every lens he was using for every shot, everything.
Yeah.
It was all specifically, it was in his head. He knew everything he wanted for that film, which made my life easier.
What in the first film when you saw it? I mean, because I saw both again recently, and he spoke at the Egyptian and told some great stories with Bruce. But watching them both again, I was struck by how much I hadn't thought about that. The 2 I think about all the time, but I hadn't thought of 1 in so long. But it had such a charm to seeing it again, and just the effects, even though the way they're used, even when they don't look that great, they somehow work. What was it about seeing it that first time that made you want to pursue it? Like, what was it in that film that turned you on?
It's hard to say. I don't think I've seen the first one in probably 20 or 25 years. I saw it in a double bill with Phil Duffin, and we saw it was Brainstorm first. Okay.
The Christopher Walken thing?
Yeah. Well, followed by Evil Dead. What a strange double feature.
Yeah.
And we actually went specifically to see Brainstorm, but we thought, let's stay to see this Evil Dead thing. And I ended up just going, my God, I love it. I don't know, was it the crazy energy, the nonstop, unexpected stuff happening. There's something about it just grabbed me. I thought, wow, this is fun. This is a great ride.
It feels handmade.
Yeah, very much so. There was, I think there's a lot of love and care into it.
Yeah.
Which I think you don't have in a lot of horror films, and it really shows when somebody doesn't give a shit about what they're doing.
I love that you see a movie like Nightmare on Elm Street and like, oh, we got to work on this. How do we get to the sequel?
Yeah.
Let's do it. I see Evil Dead. How do we get to the
There's not too much of that happening
today. He did
today.
Nightmare 3. We need to back up to that.
I mean, that's a lot of people's favorite movie of that franchise.
Anything but The Black Room. Keep going.
Wait, is there more Black Room stories?
No, just the one.
In Nightmare 3, the one that I always wanted to know about is how did you make the little like crying heroin needle marks?
I didn't do those. If you go to see Nightmare 3, it was Kevin Yeager, Greg Canham, and myself. We divided the effects.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
So what are some of the ones that you remember? Because that movie is, the best thing about it, it's the only Nightmare sequel that actually fulfills, I think, the pitch and fantasy of a dreamscape, where they're actually...
That's a great film.
It really is.
The main thing I did was not featured. It wasn't even shot, which was the baby in the beginning, the little girl. The little girl who says, this is where he takes us. She has to be a shriveled, emaciated corpse in Patricia Arquette's arms. I've told the story so many times, but...
we haven't
heard it.
Yeah.
Well, pretty much Chuck Russell said, I wanted to do it because it was the first thing he saw in the movie, and I thought this would be really cool. And I asked Chuck what he wanted, and he told me these 2 words, think Auschwitz. So I go to the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and I get research photos, and I sculpt this 3-foot emaciated puppet. I spent a long time sculpting it, and I kept calling Chuck to come out and look at it. And this is back before internet and email, and he never came out. And he just said, well, finish it up and bring it. And I did that, and everybody loved it. I brought it to the set, and everybody loved it, and they couldn't wait to shoot it. Roy Wagner, the DP, Rachel Talalay. And Chuck was being torn every which way by shooting 3 units. We're like right before Christmas. There was a lot of pressure. And he took one look at it and said, we can't shoot this. People think I hate Jews or something. But you told me. And I said, at least put it on film. Oh, I'm too busy. I'm shooting 3 units at once here. And they never even filmed it. Film it and decide later when you can think straight. Right now, there's 3 units going. It's 2 days before Christmas. There's intense pressure everywhere. Never even filmed it.
What happened to the model? You still have it?
No, it gradually rotted away. But they ended up putting I had some prop guy throw together a prop in 10 minutes. I spent 10 weeks making this mechanical model, and Bob Kurtzman mechanized the little tiny hands. It opened its eyes and its mouth and reached up and grabbed Patricia. It was really horrifying.
Wow.
Would have been a great intro in the first 5 minutes of the film.
So I like this quote that I found. Angus Scrimm, who recently departed, and great guy,
God bless him,
called you the Julia Childs of makeup. So it's now up to you to describe, because Angus isn't here, what the hell he's talking about.
I don't remember when and where he said it. I think it was on the set of Nightmare or Phantasm 2. And I can't blame him, because I was, in addition to the prosthetics, I would put on yellow blood made from milk and yogurt and chicken skin on his neck and gelatin. And he would always ask me as I'm, putting things on, well, what's that? I said, oh, it's gelatin that made from, pigs or whatever. What's that? That's his yogurt. What's that? Raw chicken skin. And he called me, oh, you, Mark, you're like the Julia Child of makeup.
That's such a great tag.
And I loved it. You can't beat that.
Now, what do you do with chicken skin?
I actually got the idea from Kevin Yeager, who had used it in an effect. It had a real quality, because it is real. And on Angus's melting neck, I'd sculpted all the stuff, and we put it in the blood tubes and whatnot. And I thought I'd try the chicken skin to see, what it would do. And it worked beautifully, because, chicken skin has that yellowy color and the goosebumps on it.
I'm going to be sick.
The trouble was... I'd be sending PAs off to Ralph's. Give me 5 big things of chicken skin. Okay. What are we having for dinner? I said, no, I'm going to use it for makeup. The hard part was getting it to stick, because it's really greasy. So I had to wash it off with ivory soap for about half an hour in the sink to get the grease off, to be able to super glue it to the rubber pieces.
Wow.
And of course, after about an hour under the movie lights, that shit starts to stink pretty bad.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is, did it smell? Because raw chicken has that distinctive kind of sickening smell.
But, poor Angus, he'd be shooting all day covered in all this crap. After a while, anything will start to smell a little foul.
I feel like the problems of your daily life are very different than most people. Like, I got to get this chicken skin.
I've got to get this report emailed right away.
Yeah, exactly. We need copies of this.
How do we get the grease off the chicken skin?
How do we get the super glue to stick to the chicken skin?
That's a big sequel. I mean, it feels like as a much bigger movie than the first one. How did you get introduced? Was it similar? Were you saw Phantasm and you were interested, or did they contact you?
I'd seen Phantasm and liked it. Actually, Don called me out of the blue. Sam Raimi recommended me for that. So I have Sam to thank for that.
It's a super creative series. I mean, the first film just has this it feels very original, of a nightmare of somebody's childhood. That's what it feels like.
It's funny. I asked Don one day, I said, how did you come up with this flying spheres anyway? How'd you come up with it? And he goes, I had a dream. I just dreamed about it. I'm like, that's it? He goes, yep.
Yeah. That's
really how it feels. I mean, it does feel. But what was the working relationship with him in general? Was it, compared to other people? I'm always curious how, Sam's this high energy, seems like super pre-planned.
Sam was way more specific in what he wanted. Don was more like, I'll know when I see it, which is a little difficult with any director. Yeah. Which means it just means basically you have to go through a lot of designs, and you can't look in somebody's mind and know what they're thinking. It's a little frustrating, but he was also trusting me, and back then I'd figure, well, at some point he's going to be so busy with stuff, he's going to have to trust me because the clock is ticking. And, I knew what I was doing. I read the script. I knew what would work. There was very little case of him looking at what I did and not liking it. But he might just give suggestions and whatnot.
Yeah.
I feel like was he under a lot of pressure for that one? Because I know that was like his big... Of the Phantasm movies for Universal, kind of a little bit of a bigger budget thing.
If he was, he certainly never let on. No, it was a big thing through Universal, but I don't think he felt the pressure any more than normal.
And once again, we have skipped a brilliant part 3. In between, you did Poltergeist 3, which we are all diehard fans of.
I did live casting for that movie for John Caglione and Doug Drexler, who were doing the film in Chicago.
So was it like, I know that there's a couple of scenes where like Carol Ann appears dead. There's one where Tangina appears as like a corpse.
I don't know. I wasn't on the set for that. I basically did live casts of Carol Ann, Heather, and Zelda out here at my shop with Doug Drexler. He came out for some of that.
And did you, like when you work on something like just the start of something like that and you kind of hand it off, I know you couldn't have followed it through the internet, but did you hear about what was happening on the set? It was obviously a very troubled set simply because of life matters.
Oh, here and there. I mean, basically, they're shooting in Chicago. Yeah. John and Doug were doing the show. They're based in New York. Dick Smith was makeup consultant. He's based in New York. Zelda and Heather were out here. So I knew John and Doug from working with them before, and they said, hey, can you life cast these guys? And Doug came out and helped me with Zelda. I remember that. And maybe Heather. So it was basically casting Zelda's whole body and her head for a dummy of some sort, and Heather's life cast for her face. I felt so bad because Heather, I forget how old she was at the time, maybe 10, 12. She had this really soft, wispy baby hair, and if you saw an individual hair strand, it was so small you could almost not even see it. And we put a bald cap on her, to cover the hair, put the alginate on to cast the face, and I hadn't noticed that a couple of little tiny hairs had come out the side of the bald cap, and it hurt her a little bit when I took the thing off. I always felt bad about that.
Oh yeah, that's got to be hard when it's someone that young.
Yeah. She was great though.
Yeah, I mean the film. I mean, watching it, I haven't seen it in a long time, but I always remember it's just the use of practical effects, the use of mirror tricks, and it's a smart effect-driven film.
There's even a scene where the girl is just standing there and her boyfriend just comes up and rips her cheek off.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's a weird scene, but the effect is really cool in it because you don't see it coming.
So many directors today don't use practical effects enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, we talked about it a lot here. We think the split should be like, 90% practical with a 10% cleanup, using CG. But do you find yourself, it's like it took a lot of jobs away, or are there people still balancing the two?
I'm not sure. No, I think it's the whole business in general has changed. You know, you've got CG, but you've also got makeup schools, but you've also got an industry that does $100 million movies and $100,000 movies with not a lot in between. Yeah. A lot of the companies that used to make those films, which were often driven by, you know, mid-range actors selling it overseas and whatnot, those companies don't really exist that much anymore.
And can you still do what you do and feel good about it on those lower budgets, or is that just the whole, you kind of have to reinvent what you do?
There are a few things in recent years where I've given bids on, and they would come back to me a year later when they finally got their money and say, well, we can't meet your price. Can you do it for, 20% of that? I'm like, no, that won't pay for my gas and my, bucket of silicone.
Yeah.
You just have to turn them down. It's not worth doing it.
Yeah, it's going to be really difficult. And what do you think when you see these movies that are largely, say, lead with CGI? I mean, there's been, cases recently, like there's a Thing remake where, famously they replaced all the practicals that they created. They just
big
threw
mistake.
Them out. Yeah, exactly. And we talk about one called Mama quite a lot, where we also saw test footage of that where it looked incredible.
It was
the practical,
terrifying.
But then they just pulled the CGI monster. Another one that's CG. She's up there on screen for far too long. Like you're just
in broad
looking at
daylight.
Yeah, well, it's just one of those things. So how do you feel when you watch CG created creatures? Is it hard to even kind of watch it?
Well, I'm very aware of it. Put it that way. I mean, you're talking to a guy that, I grew up in the 80s. Yeah. I started in this business in the 80s when I was teaching for a while. I edited a 7-minute reel of all the effects from The Thing, and I'd play it for my students on day one, and they'd go, wow, great CGI, and I'd shut it off, go, that's all practical. That was all real.
Yeah.
Today, I don't know, it's such a big issue. You've got many directors who totally rely on it for the wrong reasons, usually time. You've got a few directors like Del Toro or Corn Hardy with The Hallow. Brilliant blending of practical and CG. It's a matter of working with the director who knows about both worlds and knows when to use one and not the other and how to blend the two.
During the 80s, somebody who, Screaming Mad George's work always interested me because of how just flat out surreal it was.
Yeah.
Like it was just a different influence than a lot of other people.
Very original.
It was coming from a very different place. And you imagine, were there other people working at the time, because it was such a rich time for this kind of work, who you personally were just a fan of it? Like you really just loved what they're doing. You'd go see a movie, even though they're contemporary or, working at the same time as you.
Rob Bottin.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah, like The Thing.
That's it.
Was there any other movies where you just couldn't even, like, I'm always curious, like, because you're kind of a magician yourself, I'm always curious if you see a movie where you're like, I don't even know how they did that. Like those kind of moments. Actually,
it would be not just Rob Bottin, Dick Smith, because Dick was doing a lot of stuff at the time, like The Hunger. I remember when I saw the Ghost Story down Hollywood Boulevard.
We talked about that recently.
Yeah, we talked.
What was the Cinerama Dome? I saw it there, and it's Dick Smith. It's highly original.
Yeah.
Any other makeup artist would have created some shitty, application on somebody. He did these wonderful hand puppets, beautiful. So, to answer your question, it would be Dick Smith.
You have those moments where you see that. Yeah, I think that's great. It's so nice that the idea of being someone who can do all this stuff anyway, but to see something that you were kind of like, oh, wow.
Well, a lot of the work that comes out is not original.
Yeah.
Dick Smith's work, Rob Bottin's work stands out. They always stood out as being highly original, innovative, just something I looked forward to personally. A lot of the stuff I see today, BFD, sorry. Big fucking deal. A zombie. Oh, we've seen that before. Okay, how original can that be? Or a werewolf. I mean, I haven't seen a good werewolf in 30 years.
On the werewolf debate, when Howling came out, basically same time as American Werewolf, and American Werewolf, has just such a realistic take on the transformation, and then Howling's like a very bizarre, like you just keep watching it, and it keeps happening, and his head gets bigger and bigger. I mean, did you watch those two in theaters at the time?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I watched them more than once. I remember when The Howling came out, I lived in Pasadena at California Lake, and about 3 long blocks away there was this place called the State Theater, and they showed Scanners and The Howling. And of course, this was before VHS or any of that. And I would pay my $5 to go see The Howling repeatedly, and I'd walk up the street at night, and I'd pay my $5 to see Scanners, which I actually didn't like, to sit through and watch Dick Smith's stuff at the end.
Or that one great head explosion when Ironside blows the guy.
And then I remember going downtown to the $1 Million Theater at midnight to watch The Howling again, because we had to see it, and it was a really sleazy, bad area. And I thought, we're going to get shot here. Who cares? It's howling.
The one
That's the fun of it, the danger of seeing some
we're going to risk death to see it. God damn it.
You never hear danger stories about LA. It's always the 42nd Street stuff, but in New York. But
well, back then, downtown LA at midnight.
Downtown LA at midnight is still a little scary.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
But it was, you know.
Have you done a big head explosion? Have you ever been asked to do one of those?
Gosh, have I?
Because I always think of the one from, I was going to ask you anyway, like Scanners, the one where Ironside versus Maniac.
No, I don't think I have.
You remember the Maniac where he shoots his own head?
Yeah.
Not too impressed.
Not too impressed. Well, that moment, the head explosions in general, I think, get me.
There's a great what do you call them, GIFs or GIF of the head explosion from Scanners floating around.
Oh, yeah. I mean, those are always, I always think they're fun. So I think we have to put that on your to-do list.
Okay.
But we have to give you more than 20% of your ask.
Please do.
Now, before we start running out of time, I have to ask about Voyager.
Okay,
I was hoping you would.
Specify what kind of Voyager.
A huge Trekkie.
I am. I'm a huge Trekkie, and Voyager has always been my favorite. And I argue this with people all the time, just because I love just Voyager. I love Captain Janeway and everything, but I love the characters that are created in Voyager, specifically the monsters, because they're not staying in a central location. They're traveling the entire time. So you get all of these different types of monsters. So I just have to ask, like, what it's like working on there. That was also the most Borg heavy of the entire series, right?
I was on the first 3 years, and the Borgs kind of started to come in at the end.
We're a little bit later. So you were on, like, with the Kazon. And,
I designed and sculpted all those.
Was Jeff Combs on any of that?
Yeah, Jeff Combs was on.
He
was mostly on the prior one.
Okay.
Escaping me. Yeah.
At the point I got onto Star Trek, I'd just gotten to the Union, met Mike Westmore, and I started working on Deep Space Nine for just a few weeks before the season shut down. And when I came back, they were shooting Deep Space Nine, the last episodes of Next Generation, which I didn't work on. But I was working on Deep Space, on Generations was shooting, and Star Trek Voyager was starting up. I was actually the first makeup artist hired on that to sculpt and design all the Kazons and all the makeups. Wow. Not all the makeups, but a lot of them.
So like Tess, and I don't even remember his name now, but he ended up being kind of Tess's boyfriend. He was a little...
Scott Wheeler did Neelix, yeah.
Yeah, so Neelix, that was
Michael Westmore brought me in to sculpt all the future alien stuff. I was working alone for about a month, and Scott Wheeler came on, and he was in charge of Neelix, and he did all that sculpture and makeup himself.
Wow, such beautiful work on that.
So Scott and I were in from the beginning, and months. They're still building the set, so we used to walk down and, they're building the bridge. Yeah, we should have taken pictures.
They had one of the bridges. It was actually one of the bridges from, I think it was Deep Space Nine, was set up at Comic-Con last year, and I got my daughter sitting on it. It was amazing. So.
Well, I worked on Deep Space Nine a little bit. It was a much more of a depressing set because it was all dark. There was a lot of dysfunctionality amongst people on the show. Without getting into details, it just wasn't fun. But Voyager was fun because the sets were brighter. The cast loved each other. They got along well. The cast and crew worked well together, and that was a great bunch of people.
Wow, it comes through on screen. Really
I think so. It was much more fun.
Were you a big Star Trek fan going into that? Because I can't imagine going into that world.
No, zero. In fact, one time we had, being employees on the show, we had an open door to submit teleplays to the writers.
Oh, wow.
To the producers. We're on the show. We can do that, and I sat down with Scott Wheeler one day. We were talking about it, and we actually thought of doing it. And then I thought of doing it myself, and I got these Star Trek books on what the whole Star Trek world is about. I could never get into it. And that was a perfect opportunity because they paid really well. But I couldn't come up with a teleplay for something I didn't care about. I'd seen Star Trek as a kid, but I was not a Trekkie.
What about, there's one other TV show that, because it just came back, and was definitely one of the faults was there was too much CG in this new version, that's for sure. X-Files.
Yeah.
And I know you worked on a couple episodes of X-Files. What did you do on the X-Files?
Oh, gosh. I was working on Buffy and the X-Files for many years, in and out, mostly going on set to work for Optic Nerve at the time. For whatever was needed. I mean, it all blended together. It was like, could be little aliens, could be who knows what.
Was it a fun set at that time when you came on?
Yeah, it was all right. It was different every time. It was weird because, not only was I hopping around from show to show, every time I'd hop on the X-Files or Buffy, it would be a different director who I didn't know. So it was a little weird, you know.
And they're probably the 2 #1 shows at that time. I would imagine they're both huge by then.
Yeah, they're huge.
Especially in the horror
But
world.
see, on the Star Trek, we had a stable of directors, maybe 9 or 10, and they kept repeating. So over 3 years, you got to know them. They knew you by name and whatnot.
And the cast relatively stayed the same on Voyager because the whole concept of, for you guys, the whole concept of Voyager was that they ended up going through a wormhole which zapped them to like the other end of the galaxy, and they're trying to travel to get home, but they're stuck on the ship with the same people.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
along the way, they encounter different races.
That was great
and
for the
aliens.
extras. They had a lot of work out of that.
Yeah, I believe
Basically,
that.
Gilligan's Island.
Yeah, it's pretty much Gilligan's Island on
Never
a
thought of it
spaceship.
that way.
Yeah, because it's the same people over and over, and so yeah, it's like
A
even
3-hour tour.
even the extras start reappearing. And actually, and this is me on Baby Brain and An Hour of Sleep, but there is a horror actor who plays a serial killer in one of the episodes where he's shooting people through walls.
Shooting people through walls.
He's in Exorcist 3.
Brad
one?
Dourif?
Brad Dourif, thank you.
there you go.
That was one of my favorite episodes.
I love that episode, but he ended up bringing him back. Like, you're like, oh man, Brad Dourif's in this thing.
You know, the funny thing about the Brad Dourif episode is my job on Voyager went like this. Michael Westmore would have Scott Wheeler and I design Aliens of the Week, and we'd kind of trade off. And if I came to Mike, he'd go, okay, next week you're sculpting, and so-and-so is going to watch your makeup on set. So I knew there was always prosthetics. I was always sculpting. I was applying prosthetic makeups. And Michael said, well, everybody's busy with other stuff, so we're going to have you watch set next week. And it's Tim Russ, Tuvok with his rubber ears, and Brad Dourif as a prisoner. 2 guys talking in a prison. Is that the episode you're talking about?
That's actually, I think, the next one, because they ended up bringing him back for a couple of them. Like and then eventually he takes over the indoor garden because he's isolated and can't mess with anybody.
As far as the order we shot it, this was the first time Brad Dourif was on the show.
Okay, and this was the serial
killer
killer
one. I was
one.
dreading those hours because to stand on set for 15 hours, you know, I do Tim's ears, I maintain them, they don't require any work. I was dreadfully afraid of being bored to tears, powdering Brad Dourif's nose every 2 hours. But I got through it by watching them act, and that to me was really cool.
I swear, it's one of Dourif's best performances because it's that same serial killer MO, but
he's such a terrific actor.
He doesn't want to be a serial killer, and he's trying to explain to them like, I don't want to do these things. I don't know why I'm compelled to do these things, and that plays in later in the show. But it's like his greatest performance.
I learned so much about acting just by watching him every take. I was probably paying more attention to him than the director. And certainly more than the other crew members, because I appreciated the craft of acting, of what he was doing, and watching him. He was the finest actor I'd seen up to that point, and probably since then.
Yeah,
I was very impressed.
Just because it was his birthday yesterday, I did want to ask you, like, what was your take on Cronenberg as a director when you're watching Videodrome? Because
I love Cronenberg. I've never worked with him. I didn't go on set for that. That was Rick's show.
Okay, yeah.
But I love Cronenberg. Yeah. I didn't like Scanners too much.
No, I'm not a huge fan.
I like the dark worlds he creates. Yeah. I love The Fly. I think The Fly is brilliant.
Yeah.
Now, having done both worlds, which one do you prefer? Kind of the longevity of film where you're working on the same thing for 6 months, or TV where it's very punctuated?
Well, TV is great because it's a wonderful paycheck. It's really steady. But if you do anything for too long, it gets to be a bit of a drain, you know. And I was running out of creative ideas on that because there were limitations on the makeups for Star Trek. We couldn't create big buck-eyed aliens. They always had to have their own eyes and whatnot. So it became a little bit limiting after a while.
Was that just like a budgetary restriction?
No, that was a Roddenberry. That was a Roddenberryism, I'll call it.
Oh, it's an interesting choice.
Do you keep up with contemporary horror and stuff like that? Is there anything in the last couple of years that has impressed? I mean, with the effects world in general, it's just like, I don't even know, in the 80s we can name, guys like Rick Baker. And
Screen Magic.
I can name contemporary effects people, but I have to question if it's just because they're our friends.
Well, I don't go to see horror films just because of the effects. I want to see a film because it's a good film, and there's a lot that I haven't been that impressed in recent years, and I'm really picky about horror. A few things have stood out. I don't follow the genre as much as I used to, just because it's a different wave of things out there. I have to really hear something great about a horror film to run and see it.
Did you see some? Obviously, like kind of these indie, almost art house horror ones have been getting the most praised things. The Babadook, I imagine you heard of.
I've seen the Babadook,
Yep.
which I really liked.
Yep.
Right before that, the one I really liked was A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if you can call it strictly horror
It has horror. Yeah, we all liked it. Yeah.
It's an Iranian vampire Western.
Definitely
James Dean.
Yeah, it's a really original voice.
Very original.
Very different. Yeah, I'm glad
film.
you saw that one. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. Did you see Your Next?
No.
Slasher film. Yeah, I'd be interested to see what
I watched a film called The Falling, an English film, I believe.
No, I don't know.
Which was great on mood and atmosphere and acting, but kind of left me dry at the end.
Well, you told me on the way in here that you're going to go see The Witch next.
I saw the
On the big
trailer
screen.
to The Witch on iTunes a couple of nights ago, and I was 30 seconds into it, and I shut off and said, I've got to see this.
Exactly what
This
I did. I
looks-
shut my eyes in the theater and
This
went like
looks
this.
really creepy, and I've had ghostly experiences in my life,
Okay.
to the extreme ones,
Yeah.
to the point where not much scares me in a movie, and I looked at that and I thought, I'm there.
And then the period
Is-
is perfect. Like they get the period details are really great.
Is
But
this
I
the
like-
right falling? A mystery fainting epidemic strikes the
Yes,
children
yes.
in
and that's
an
a cool
all-girls
part
school?
of it. That's,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm there. I'll watch it.
But I have to say, I watched Corin Hardy's film The Hallow, which I really
Yeah,
liked.
I
That
like that
was
too.
in my top 10
Very-
from last year.
Great
Very
creatures.
original.
Yeah, I love the
in
creature
addition to
effects.
the great creatures, really well cast. The cast had chemistry, those two people. And that baby, in fact, I wrote to Corin and said, that fucking baby fooled me the whole movie. Because I know when you work with a baby on set, you're really limited. And at a certain point, it works so well, I just forgot about it. And I thought, okay, maybe they're carrying a puppet around, but the puppet's moving. That's pretty neat. They must have had some limitations. It was a mechanical silicone baby that was
Oh, wow.
beautiful.
Yeah, I've always wondered that because having just had a baby, they cry, coo, whine
it'd be a pain in the ass.
constantly. I couldn't even imagine having one on set. You'd have to stop every take.
We shot with an infant on Voyager once, and the regulations by the Social Services Department are like so strict. You have exactly 10 minutes. You have to heat the soundstage up to 90 degrees, I think it was.
Oh
So-
my gosh, that's crazy.
And you have a social worker with a stopwatch. From the moment the mom comes in with the infant, that stopwatch is going 10 minutes or clicking off. You have to have everything ready.
That is
And it was a baby that had to have a little prosthetic on its forehead. You can only use KY jelly or like strawberry jam to put the prosthetic on. I think we used KY.
Wow, I couldn't believe when we shot the segments for Tales of Halloween, my daughter was like 1.5
She
at the
was in
time.
it?
Yeah, my
Oh my
daughter's
God.
in it. Well, we're all in it too. But yeah, my daughter's
shoulder.
Barely.
Yeah, under my shoulder.
My daughter's in a couple of scenes, but for she's only like 1.5 years when we did it, and they kept hiring an on-set teacher for her, and I was like, she's not even in school.
What are you
She's
going
just
to teach her?
yeah, I was like,
The
I'm
alphabet?
sorry that you have to keep hiring a teacher. Like, she could barely even. She was maybe she was 1 year. She was talking, but she couldn't even say like trick or treat legibly. Yeah, and I was like, she's just gonna sit in the corner and eat like Cheerios and watch Elmo. But every single time she was on set, they had to have an on-set teacher for her.
Well, check out The Hallow. In addition to the baby being a great magic trick, it's a really
It's a
good
great movie. No,
Yeah,
I
it
absolutely
looks wonderful.
Blu-ray just is coming out in a
Yeah, it's
couple of
coming out
weeks
very
because I
soon.
just got a review
The
copy of
Screen-
it.
yeah, Screen
Awesome
Factory.
cover on that.
Screen Factory's doing all the IFC midnight stuff. So
Yeah.
Are there any filmmakers who you've been watching the last even decade or so who you just personally would be interested to work with at a collaborative level that you haven't had a chance to?
Gosh, it's a tough question.
Good time to pitch.
No, I'm drawing a blank right now.
Who's there? I was thinking of. Did you see The Descent?
No, not yet.
Ah, that's one I would highly recommend.
great one from the
Probably
2000s.
one of
Really
my
good
favorite.
effects.
If it's from
the
2000,
best.
probably my favorite film of that decade. But it's a bunch of women go caving,
Spelunking?
yeah, spelunking into. They're British, but it's set in North Carolina, and they go into this cave that. Clearly, there had been a group of people who had gone lost there like years and years before. You don't really know what, and then this kind of vampiric thing starts coming out, and it's really
Is it out like on Netflix? Do you know?
probably a disc. They would
Yeah,
have the
DVD
disc. I
and
don't know if
Blu-ray.
it's
Yeah.
streaming.
Yeah,
it
you
might be.
could- You could probably rent it on Amazon.
I
or something,
actually think it
streaming.
might be. I'll have to check, but I think it was on Hulu at one point.
Yeah.
But
Hulu
It's
has
intense.
commercials, right?
it depends. Like I pay like $5 more a month and get my Hulu commercial free, but it depends on the package I've got.
I waited a long time for the sequel to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon because I love the original. Right? I was so disappointed that I pulled out my old copy of 1959, The Alligator People with Lon Chaney, and said, now we're going to watch a movie.
That's Netflix original.
Yeah, totally.
I tend to rewatch classics. I go through my Netflix list and go, okay, I've seen that. That doesn't interest me. And I'll go back to
Is there a kind of creature you've never gotten a chance to create that you always like, or something you've modeled yourself, but it's never been screen used that you would have loved to have seen?
Sure, but I don't know what it is. Like a werewolf, a mummy. I've always wanted to do a Western, actually.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I think I just heard werewolf, mummy, Western. And now my mind's racing.
You hear that, people?
Werewolf, mummy, Western.
The mummies would fit nicely in the West. Like a mummy Western seems...
Been done.
Has it?
Yeah.
Which one?
I can't think of the title, but it has been done.
Okay.
I was working years ago. I was working with Phil Nutman, the horror writer. He was a good friend of mine for 30 years, and we were trying to come up with a really cool horror concept because with both of our positions in horror, we thought this is a shoe-in. Well, first of all, Phil was at the time working on children's books, and he didn't want to. I'm done with fucking horror. And finally, I'm talking him into this, and we talked every day for a couple of years to try and come up with a cool horror concept which hadn't been done. He finally came up with a Jack the Ripper werewolf in San Francisco based upon Dirty Harry, but we never went anywhere with it.
That's kind of like almost that. What is that thing? That Canadian thing? Baggett Wolf. What was that thing that last year? Wolf Cop.
Wolf Cop. Oh my gosh.
It's a terrible movie, but it makes total sense that they probably ripped it off.
It's hard to think of something that hasn't been done before.
Yeah.
What were you going to ask, Rob?
Oh, sorry.
No, sorry.
We were just, you mentioned Western Mummy, and then I Googled Western Mummy, and I just realized
there's 10 films?
The first article that pops up is actually one that is on the Blumhouse.com site
Get
today.
outta here.
Elmer McCurdy. We talk on there about how he ended up being found in a fun house, but he was an old Western. This is a true story. This isn't a movie. And I even put in the Facebook heading that this needed to be a movie, and I was looking to you Coen brothers for this one. But Elmer McCurdy was this like most inept criminal in the West, where he would like try to rob a train, but he robbed the wrong train. And there's one point where he tried to blow up a bank safe, but he actually blew up the entire bank, but the safe was still intact at the end. So he stole the banker's watch, and that's all he got out of the deal. And this happened repeatedly, and he was like the most inept criminal of all time. Well, eventually he got shot by one of the lawmen that he had like tried to steal something from the town and didn't actually get it, and he got shot. Then he got taken to the funeral home, but nobody claimed the body. So the funeral parlor, whoever ran the funeral parlor, propped him up in the corner and charged like 2 bits a gander for a couple of years before he was finally purchased by a film company, or it was a carnival. He was purchased by a carnival, a touring carnival, who took his like mummified body around for a while. They mummified him with arsenic. Then after they did that for a while, he was purchased by a film company. They were making 1930-something's film Narcotic. And they would prop him up in the lobby of narcotic screenings and told the audience that he was a ex-heroin addict who had died and that this was like what heroin does to the body. Totally exploitive. Wow. Then he was bought by the filmmakers who did She-Freak and carried around with the film She-Freak for a while before he was finally sold to a fun house in Long Beach. And he hung there for like decades until they were shooting the $6 Million Man, and the props guy, they were shooting it in the fun house in Long Beach. The props guy went to move him to a different location. His arm fell off. They saw that there was actually bone underneath, and they were like, holy shit, this is like a real guy hanging up in the fun house.
Poor Elmer.
So then they trace it back through the bill of sale and trace it back to this criminal from the Wild West who was mummified. And that's the story of Elmer McCurdy.
That's actually
and why this doesn't... I have to give full credit to my husband on this one because he's been telling me about this story for years. And I've been like, it's like he tells it to Marnie all the time. He's like, this is his bedtime story. We're telling the story of Elmer McCurdy.
So how does this tie into the Blumhouse site?
Yeah, and
they did an article
it's
today.
Actually, he put up an article on it today that's there. But when you Google Western Mummy, it's the first thing that comes up is the tale of Elmer McCurdy.
By the end of this episode, I'd say. I get the guys who wrote Ed Wood. They're good at those true life, they're good at those kinds of things.
So it's what happens after he dies is far more fast. I mean, like, he's a horrible criminal, but it keeps going.
But what
afterwards.
a first act, even though, like,
I know, right?
blowing up.
Boy, too bad his relatives don't get royalties.
Yeah, David Gregory, who runs Severin, messaged me today when he saw that article go up and said that they actually did, that he didn't even remember what it was, but when he was a kid in UK, he actually watched a TV show on the life of this guy, but had no idea what it was. He was just like somewhere out there. There was like a TV show on the life of this guy.
Finally,
long
question
ago.
answered.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I guess in closing, I just wanted to talk about what you're working on now. What still excites you about movies? I mean, do you still love doing effects? What is exciting you these days about the creative process?
I've been writing mostly in the last 5 years, trying to get a few movies of my own off the ground. But right now, it's sort of at the stage of getting financing, so I don't want to talk about it too much. But that's one creative area I've really gotten into in recent years.
And have you always written? I mean, obviously you mentioned music early on.
No, I've always done creative stuff since I was a kid. Music, I played I don't know how many instruments, filmmaking, makeup, sculpture, photography. I've been writing since 1989. Actually, Phil Nutman and I wrote a screenplay together back then. So I got bitten by the bug then. So if I'm not doing something creative, I don't know what I'll be doing. But it doesn't have to be makeup and monsters. So who knows what the future will bring? Nice. Maybe I'll be here in a year telling you about it.
I hope so.
I hope so.
Yeah,
it's been really neat hearing about. So there's just so many different movies from such different parts. Like I don't know. There's like I think of the Stuart Gordon stuff is so different than thinking about something like The Mutilator to me. So it's cool to talk to someone.
And I guess in retrospect, like working with guys like Sam Raimi and Don Coscarelli and Stuart Gordon. I mean, at the time, you're in the thick of it. You're just moving on to the next gig and stuff. But looking back, like. These are filmmakers that we revere and that we grew up watching. I mean, is it interesting, like being like, wow, I can't believe I worked with this eclectic group of people?
You don't think about it at the time, you really don't. I mean, now a lot of them are, cult classic legends, but at the time you don't think about it. Nobody thought, Sam Raimi would be who he is, or Evil Dead, or Nightmare on Elm Street, or any of that. You're not taking it as just another job. You have no idea where these things are going to go.
I hope you get to do some Friday 13th kills still. I'm sure there's going to be more reincarnations there.
I don't know. If they called me for it, I don't know if I'd be up for it.
Yeah. Maybe just one kill.
Just one. Just come back for a bit.
Just one ultimate Jason kill.
Well, I was really happy to do that Amityville trailer, that pitch trailer.
Yeah.
Because I'd never done a Halloween movie or an Amityville movie. Now I've done an Amity, sort of.
Yeah.
But it hasn't come out. So Friday the 13th, that's never been on the map, really.
No radar.
Wow.
Yeah, but that fishhook kill, maybe they'll...
Yeah, you didn't ask about
Mutilator
that.
hadn't been seen very much, so now it will.
Mutilator, yeah.
Yeah, that's all the hook.
I'll never live that down.
I think the actors will have a harder time living that film down than you will, so you come off well.
Thank you.
You're in good shape. Well, Mark, I really want to thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for
I know we
having me.
put this together pretty last minute, but we appreciate it. And,
It was a lot of fun.
I appreciate you having me.
Yeah,
I
that's
hope
cool.
you
Thank
guys
you
enjoy
for
it.
joining us.
Hopefully we'll be back.
Yeah, we'll see you next week,
See you
guys.
next week.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.